tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
I have been asked this question so many times, and the best way to answer it is that I am no different to you. I am no different to any other human. I have been given this life that I'm very appreciative of. It's, and this gift. And I truly do believe it's a gift that angels send people to me and speak through me and use my voice, but not my opinion. I call myself a medium, but not a psychic. I don't believe in fortune tellers. I don't believe that people can tell your fortune. I think we can change our fortune by the law of attraction. But I've always known I was different. I was always that different kid. I would always talk to walls or talk to doors, as my mother used to say. But I was always different. And I always felt different. So I guess the best way to describe it is I have this most beautiful gift that I get to talk to those that are no longer here. And I get to talk to those who have never been here, which are angels. I see it as of a great service. I've been doing it from when I was a child. And I was always told to shh, don't say anything. People think you're crazy, they lock you up. I remember thinking they can lock me up. I know what I'm hearing. I know what I'm seeing. Back when I was a kid, I used to see a lot. And it wasn't until I was 18 and I went through a very tragic event that I decided that I didn't want to see, and I didn't want the gift, and I didn't want to continue with it. So there was 2 years of my life that I tried to get away from it. But it's grown since then. And I really do feel like I walk in the shoes and experience trauma that I can then have the experience to help people with.
So this has been something that's been a part of your life for as long as you can remember, even as a little girl.
Even as a little girl. I always knew I was different. I always knew that, when I was 7 when my grandmother died, my mum's mum, and back in Belfast at the time, the coffin was brought into the house, the priest was brought in, the candle was lit. And I remember my uncle saying, come and see your granny. And he was lining up all the cousins, And I looked in and I went, well, that's a bit funny. Well, she's not there. She's over there with Carlo. Now, Carlo was the dog, and the dog was lying under the stairs. And he said, can you just give your grandmother a kiss? And I was like, the one that you just, that's your granny. And I went, okay, but it's not. So I retracted back. And I remember the coffin being in the living room. And I remember the priest being there saying the rosary. And for some odd reason, back then in the houses, there was like underneath the stairs, there was this little gap. And the dog lay there. That was her dog. And the dog wouldn't eat for days. And, we have 3 days of mourning before we bury our dead. Anyway, the dog wouldn't eat. And I went into the kitchen and I remember getting a biscuit out of the biscuit barrel and bringing it back. And I sat down next to Carlo and Carlo ate the biscuit. And someone said, why did you give the dog the biscuit? And I said, because Granny told me to. She was sitting right next to me. And to this day, my family think I'm crazy, or they think I've made it up. Or, I come from a very strict Catholic background, very Irish background. My grandmother would give her last penny to the church and to receive prayer from that. So, but I do recall her saying, this is my mum's mum. When I was a little girl, I would say things and she'd say, shh, I believe you because I do too, but you can't tell anybody. And I just always remember, being made fun of. If I would say something, all the other cousins would, say things, or siblings would laugh and say, oh, well, that's just Elizabeth. That's just, my mum came up with this word, imagination. And she would tell people, my Elizabeth has a vivid imagination, just ignore her. you know. But I would say to people, oh, you know, oh, there's such and such standing behind you. And they would go, no, they're not here anymore. And I can remember my mum pushing me, like, back, you know. And it was probably difficult because at the time she had 4 young children. One incident I would like to bring up is I was born the 4th of August 1969, and internment in Belfast broke out on the 9th of August 1969. So I've known nothing but troubles all my life. And I was probably about 6 years old. And I would watch the clock and deliberately get myself into trouble. Because if I'd done that, my mum would put me in the hallway. And you would sit in the hallway and she'd say, you wait till your father comes home. My father was a builder. And I knew my dad would come home and have dinner and then go back out again to the business. And I sat there, I would look for the van coming, and then I'd smack my brother and he would cry. And that was it. I was out in the hallway. And it wasn't until years later I realised why I'd done that. I thought if I was there in that workshop with him, they're not going to shoot a man when there's a little girl there. But I realised as I got older, they're not going to shoot him because my energy was there. And at the time, I can recall people being picked up, murdered, and taken away all around that area. My dad was safe. And I knew in my heart I had to do something that was naughty just to get into that hallway. And he would come in and go, which one am I taking? And she would go, that one. You know, so I just always knew I was different. And I had to grow up with that knowledge and own it. And when I was 18, I had a horrific thing happen to me. And I never thought I would get over it. I never knew why this incident was taking place. I was raped and punched and kicked and, you know. When the punches were coming at me, I remember thinking, please God, come and take me, because I can't. I just can't take another punch. And I remember this shadow stood there, big shadow, and I looked up at it, and I said, are you here to take, just please take me, please take me. And he said, if I take you, if that's what you want, I will take you. But if you choose to stay, your life will change forever. You've got to understand that. And I chose to stay. I don't know why. I do now, but I chose to stay. And I managed to get free from him. And cut a long story short, anyway, I was brought back then, 1989, we didn't have police offices like you guys did. We had barracks where there was big metal doors and there was like soldiers looking out of. I remember my father threw me in front of the soldier and he said, open the gate. And the soldier just looked. He said, open the gate. So I remember the gates opening and I walked in and the detective came out and I looked at the detective and he looked at me. And the bond and the relationship from then on, you know, was amazing. You know, I've lost touch with him today, but I remember sitting in that room and I took out my earrings and I knew that there was a purpose for this happening and I had to tell my story. So I began to tell Detective Scott my story and I told him about the vision that I'd seen. And he said, so there was someone else in the room. So there was another person there. And I said, oh, yeah, there was. So he left the interview room and he came back in. And he said, Elizabeth, I want you to tell me again exactly what you said. So I repeated what I told him. The thing that raped me, who I have forgiven, I just prefer to call him a thing, I didn't realise 2 cells down was being interviewed. They actually caught him. He walked in and confessed everything. Told exactly the same story. The detective cleared the room and he looked at me. He said, I can't use this in court. I cannot use this in court. I said, you don't need to. But this is what happened. and this is why I'm here. So eventually, back in them days, you know, you were not taken straight to hospital. I had to go for an examination. And I remember having a shower, and the lady who examined me was very rough with me, and she complained because she had a casserole in the oven and it was New Year's Day and she had people over. And the little police officer, Alison, I remember she yelled at her. And I remember just sitting in the shower, just letting the water fall over me, asking, why am I here? And it was the strangest feeling. It was a feeling more coming from, not a voice, but a feeling. You're going to make such a difference. You know, you're going to get through this. I was then brought to hospital, and I remember my uncle, he was a security guard, didn't say that he knew me, but he sat in the room with me because I wasn't allowed near family or friends. No one was allowed near me. I had police surrounding me. And the strangest thing happened. This doctor walked in. Back then, they didn't have CT scans or anything like that. And he walked in and he looked at me, asked me a few questions. He'd walk out and he'd come back in. And I thought, this is strange. And he looked at me right in the eye and he said, you shouldn't be here. Why are you here? What? He said, you have a bleed on the brain, you have a fracture on your skull, you have a broken cheekbone, you should be bleeding out, you should not be here. And I said, well, I am. I'm here and I'm talking to you. Of course I'm here, you know. And they just put it down to, oh, well, she was obviously very, you know, the bleed in the brain, it stopped. They had me in hospital for a few days. The bleed in the brain dried up very quickly, like literally overnight. Medically, there was no reason for me to be alive. I remember he got 10 years. And I remember coming home. I got myself a little job and I came home. And my father had the newspaper in front. There was a police officer at the door. And I walked in, and the first thing I said was, my God, he's out, they've let him go. And Detective Scott looked at me and with the biggest smile on his face, and he said he has confessed to rape on 2 accounts and grievous bodily harm. We just couldn't get him on attempted murder. And I said, okay. He said, Elizabeth, did you hear what I said? You know, he's been sentenced to 10 years. And I looked at Detective Scott and I said, okay. I said, I got a life sentence. And one day, right now I don't have a voice, but one day I will have a voice. And, you know, back then it was, I remember my dad saying after Detective Scott left, that's it. We do never ever talk about this again. And I went through mental torture, which then led me to an abusive marriage because it was just rolling after that. It wasn't until I was in my 30s and I had my son that I escaped to Australia that I really, really started to use the gift and started to realize this has happened because I need to walk in people's shoes and I need to help them and they need to know my story. And it was actually a couple of weeks ago I watched a young lady who became the young Australian of the year. And she was raped by I think it was a teacher. And she said, I have a voice. And I looked at her and I went, I so want to reach out to you. I so want to contact you because I never had that voice back then. I know what it's like to hate. I know what it's like not to forgive. I've gone through every emotion you can think of. And I have forgiven him. He was 19 years old. He was on drugs. You know, no one ever really sets out to do that deliberately. As far as I'm aware, he has passed over to the other side. My life dramatically did change. Whoever was in that room, which I believe were my guardian angels, I had a choice to go. And then that physician, that doctor, said himself, why are you here? And yes, so I started the journey of setting up Irish Angel House and, you know, and I opened the doors, and people just flowed in from all walks of life. People whose family members were murdered, or they've gone through grief, or they've lost a child. A young man came through to me. He was 2 days before his 18th birthday, he died of brain cancer. You know, and you know, people who have been murdered, who have been in the media, and I don't want to out of respect for the family, but yes, they have come through. You know, and to me, today, at 51, 30-something years later, divorced twice, with a beautiful man right now, I don't plan on being with anyone else in the future. Yeah, my life has gone full circle, and I use my past and my energy and my love to teach people that there is a way forward, that the angels do exist, and that the dead can talk. They talk through me. So every reading I've given is, you know, I start a reading with, you know, I step out of my energy, and you're not getting my opinion, you know, and whatever comes through, I bring through.
And you've used that gift to help and read so many people, myself included.
I mean, I couldn't. All over the world.
Which is just
technology,
incredible.
From Los Angeles to Mexico to Greece to Florida to Ireland to Queensland to Perth to all over the world.